At that time, lodges weren't hiring women as fishing guides. Like that wasn't a thing. And so I was really lucky. It was kind of right place, right time, and the right person to recommend me.
Yeah. Who was that she hired you or recommended you?
She hired me, Nancy Morris Lyon and her husband, Heath Lyon. And they were just great mentors in becoming a fishing guide for my first time, especially going to Alaska for my first time, a lot of firsts, and really falling in love with the area and falling in love with that job and having them as a resource to find out how to do it better. And just having somebody like her who had really paved the road for somebody like myself.
Hello, and welcome to Sidechannels, presented by the Fly Fish Journal. My name is Jason Rolfe. I'm the editor of the Fly Fish Journal, as well as the host of Sidechannels, along with our photo editor, Kopi Vojta. We'll jump into our conversation with Kate and Justin Crump in a moment. But before we get there, I wanted to share a quick word about the sponsors whose support makes Sidechannels possible. Decked makes truck bed drawer systems that are absolutely top-notch, in addition to offering toolboxes, cargo gliders, and an array of accessories that will make the back of your truck the envy of everyone else at the boat ramp. This gear is tough as nails and weatherproof, and you'll be amazed at how it can improve a day on the water. I'll share a few more thoughts on my own experience with the system at the break, but for now you can get decked and get after it by visiting decked.com/flyfish. Do it. Get decked. You won't regret it. And Sidechannels is also sponsored by Patagonia Fly Fishing. Patagonia's commitment to making solid gear that stands up to all the abuse you can throw at it is matched by their dedication to seeking out, fostering, and telling great stories about fly fishing culture and conservation. It's a level of quality that isn't measured in weeks or months. Theirs is a long-term commitment. They utilize clever engineering and innovative materials to offer only essential gear built for a lifetime of hard use. It's gear that is built to connect with wild fish and wild places. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fishing to connect and learn more about the great work they're doing. Finally, if you're a fan of what we do over here and haven't already, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the Fly Fish Journal. Nothing beats the feeling and smell of getting 116 pages of pure fly fishing storytelling in your mailbox 4 times each year. We wouldn't be here without our subscribers, and we'd love to have you be a part of that crew. So, Kate and Justin Crump. When I first met them, they weren't the Crumps. They were Justin Crump and Kate Taylor, a couple of somewhat dirtbaggy fishing guides who split their time between Alaska and the Oregon coast with annual forays down to Baja. But they were also a pair of incredibly creative and driven individuals, deeply connected not just to the act of fly fishing, I think, but to the culture of fly fishing. Justin's early work with the Angling Exploration Group and the Fly Fishing Film Tour was really the precursor to the richness and variety of fly fishing film that we almost take for granted today, I think. Kate's writing on fly fishing and her drive to be an example for other female fly anglers and guides definitely set her apart as someone worth paying attention to. Since then, they've worked just as hard for the rivers and fish they love as they have to provide a meaningful experience for the folks who rely on them for the chance at an interaction with salmon, steelhead, and trout in Oregon and Alaska. Kopi and I met up with Kate and Justin earlier in the spring at their steelhead lodge overlooking Tillamook Bay on the Oregon coast. We actually ended up catching them a day later than planned because, as Kate briefly mentions, they got caught up a bit in Portland the day before with Alaska preparations. And to that point, I think there's no question that lodge experience, theirs and others, is in some ways an intrinsic part of fly fishing. You know, lodges come in all shapes and sizes, and there are some places around the world where your best chance of gaining access to a given locale is through a lodge. Our conversation with Kate and Justin ended up going pretty deep into the details of their new lodge up in Alaska. It's called the Lodge at 58 North, and that was fine by me because in some ways I think it's a prime example of a new generation of lodges I've seen showing up on the landscape. Kimsquit Bay Lodge in BC, which I visited, and Soulfly Lodge in the Bahamas, which I haven't, are a couple other examples that come to mind. It seems to me that the thing that really sets these places and others apart is the thoughtfulness that has gone into creating them. It's not so much a matter of luxury as it is providing a sense of connection to a place, something that I think is admirable and something that I think is vital to the future of a lot of these places, the fisheries and the environments. And I could go on, but I don't want this to start to sound like an infomercial, because it wasn't. I haven't been to the lodge at 58 North, but I can guarantee that if the opportunity presents itself, I'll jump on it. I think what Kate and Justin have created up on the Naknek is unique and worth learning about. And I think their experience might be able to provide a sort of roadmap for other budding outfitters who are gluttons for punishment like Kate and Justin. In any case, if you ever have the opportunity to fish with these guys, do it. They're a great pair of guides and a great pair of people, and they know how to have a good time. You can learn more about them at frigatetravel.com. Let's do the show.
Just pretend it's a karaoke mic.
I once got booed off the stage at karaoke.
No.
It was brutal.
You're not doing karaoke with the right people.
Yeah, no doubt.
I know.
There's no rules.
Yeah.
We bought a karaoke machine for the end of our first season. Danny that works for us, he was coming up for the last few days, and so I sent it to him, and then we had like a 2-day karaoke blowout at the lodge with just the team, where we like stayed up till like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then we would get up and everybody'd still be drunk and just start karaoke at 10 a.m. and go until 4 o'clock in the morning. It was such a bender. Oh, it was so much fun. But like, yeah, that karaoke machine gets so much use in Alaska now. Like, people love it. And it just takes like one person that's not like any of us that aren't good to like just sing and just be like, I don't really care. And then people are like, okay. Yeah.
I don't care either. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
I did it once, just like last year for the first time at a friend's birthday party. And I don't think it turned out well, but it was still like really awesome, just because it was like, yeah, don't care, kind of like a little drunk, don't know the words, don't know why I picked this song, but
yeah, song choice is very important.
How long have you guys been guiding in Alaska now?
2008 was my first season.
Yeah, and I started in 2009.
Dang, that's a long time. Were you working? You weren't working on your own at that time, I imagine. Were you guiding for other lodges, or what were you doing?
Before that, you mean?
Up in Alaska when you first started.
Yeah, working for a lodge up there. Mm-hmm. And I was able to get a job thanks to a good friend of ours. Actually, the friend Justin was just fishing with on the Skagit. But he worked for this lady who was the first sport fishing guide in Alaska, definitely in Bristol Bay. And so she gave me that opportunity. And
the first female sport fishing guide.
Yeah, I didn't say that correctly. Damn it.
It's kind of understood.
Yeah. At that time, lodges weren't hiring women as fishing guides. Like, that wasn't a thing. And so I was really lucky. It was kind of right place, right time, and the right person to recommend me.
Yeah. Who was that she hired you or recommended you?
She hired me, Nancy Morris Lyon and her husband Heath Lyon. And they were just great mentors in becoming a fishing guide for my first time, especially going to Alaska for my first time, a lot of firsts, and really falling in love with the area and falling in love with that job, and having them as a resource to find out how to do it better. And just having somebody like her who had really paved the road for somebody like myself. So
that was your first time guiding at all, or had you been guiding before that?
First time guiding. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, totally. What was it like? What made you decide to go for that?
That's an interesting question. I had recently moved to Southern Oregon like the year before to be with Justin, and he's a great salesman. I think one of his relatives said he could sell ice cream to Eskimos, and he really sold me on coming down there. And when I got down there, it was pretty fun place to be at first, but Justin was like traveling all over the world and having these amazing adventures. And like, I was basically down there by myself, and I had left what I felt like was a really great community. And then I was down there like, wow, this is not only is it, I don't really have friends, but also it's kind of methy. You know, it was like your car would get broken into if you parked at the boat launch with something in it. And it just wasn't like a safe environment. And the job I took to join him down there really lacked all inspiration for me. It just didn't fulfill, it just didn't make me happy. And so I think there was a lot of combinations that kind of led me to think that I could be a fishing guide in Alaska. And I think looking back, maybe that was the first year or the second year that like Justin and his work crew did the fly fishing film tour. And there was like a bunch of Alaska films, right? I was like, oh, you know, I watched that how many dozens of times because I like went and helped or supported. And so that probably like planted the seed. Like that is something that I want to have. And then Justin and his friends that he worked with were always talking about their Alaska stories because Justin spent a bunch of time in the area where I did end up going to guide, fishing and like catching giant rainbows, having bear stories, and they all had their own. And also working in a fly shop in Bellingham before that, Alaska is such the mecca for the Northwest fly fishermen, right? So everybody had a story. So I think there was all these like little seeds planted along the way of that's the next place to go for somebody like myself that was just so in love with salmon fishing and steelhead fishing and just being like a Northwesterner. So yeah, I think that it was just this seed planted. And then our friend Dan came to live with us that winter, and he had been guiding for Nancy. And I had like read all about Nancy, anything I could find about her leading up to this. Like, as you know, like spending time in a fly shop, there, you have so much time to read. So, right, I was constantly looking for other women that were doing what I was doing or interested in what I was doing, you know, just looking for somebody that was more like me. And, I was so fascinated by her because like she was such a badass and she was doing the things that I wanted to do at like such a higher level. So when Dan came to live with us, he would just tell me these stories about her, tell me his stories of big giant rainbow encounters, bear encounters. And I was just so fascinated by it. And I just kind of realized at one point, Justin was like in British Columbia fishing for a giant steelhead, like calling him on a sat phone once a week, like having just another epic adventure of his life. And I think like during that time, I was like, you know what? I'm not like that happy here. And I have really...
When you were in Oregon.
Yeah, in Southern Oregon, you know, and I was like, this isn't really making me happy. And I think that I've like steered my life along this path of what makes me happy. And I think that I got down here because being with Justin makes me happy, but like not necessarily being here. And so that is when I just kind of had this idea, well, maybe I should just, well, I think I was thinking, well, I'm definitely not going to stay here any longer. Like I'm out. But where would I go? What would I do? And I was like, I should just go to Alaska and be a fishing guide. And I didn't spend any time thinking about it. I just called my friend Dan. I said, hey, do you think I could be a fishing guide in Alaska this summer? And because he responded, oh, dude, you would be great at it. I'm going to call and see if I can get you a job. Because that was his reaction, then I didn't spend any more time thinking about reasons why I shouldn't do it. I just thought, okay, cool. He thinks so. I think so. Great. I'm going to do this. And then like I had to get a Coast Guard license and go up there. So.
What was there any sort of rude awakening sort of between the idea of it and actually going and doing it? Were there any like, oh, this is not as glamorous and romantic as I thought it would be?
No, honestly, I think it was like all those things.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm not afraid to work hard. So kind of getting up there and being like, we just jumped in and we're like, power washing boats and it's pouring down rain. I was like, oh, this is how I live back home anyway. You know, like it didn't feel like it was anything that I wasn't capable of, but certainly like getting out in the field, I would say like fishing for king salmon, trolling for king salmon was probably the hardest thing of like, oh my God, how do they even do this? You know? I remember feeling like that was really challenging, but I didn't get my Coast Guard license for like 2 months into the season. So I couldn't like legally do that anyway. Yeah. So I didn't like have that pressure of like having to like perform in that sense, you know? But yeah, I think like, I just felt like I was supposed to be there doing it. And there's certainly like, I mean, there were so many times where I was way in over my head, you know, but I also had Heath and Nancy back at the lodge to talk to at the end of the day. So I always felt like I had support to just like go back and be like, wow, I was way in over my head. What should I have done differently? And they were always willing to like talk to me about it, which was super fortunate. I don't know if everybody gets that kind of mentorship in that way.
Yeah, I think that idea of mentorship is huge. And I think there's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of places in fly fishing where, you know, the people that might be mentors kind of keep it all real close to the vest, right? Like they're not necessarily wanting to help the younger guides out or the newcomers or whatever. So, I mean, it seems like finding that must have made a huge difference in that experience. Have you guys known of other people like that in your career going through all of this, whether it's guiding or building a lodge or, you know, sort of the evolution even of your Oregon program, people that have been mentors like that and kind of taking you under their wing?
I think probably more like business related mentors than like fishing related mentors, you know, people like guests that we've met along the way that are, you know, that we talk to and then we have questions for, and then we keep on following up with them. And then like people that have been really willing to help over the years. That's probably been more the mentorship than the actual like fishing side of things. But we've had some absolutely awesome mentors for the business. Like a lot. Yeah.
I don't think that, I just don't think that we would have been as successful, or it would have been hard to be successful without the mentorship of specific people along the way and continuing today, you know? And I think it's, you know, from small things to big things, you know, there's small ideas that people have planted and then other people that have like helped me with financial budgeting kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
I'd imagine, you know, operating lodges and guiding and whatnot, that just the range and the breadth of the people that you meet and go fishing with and develop a relationship with, like it's probably, you know, yeah, like there's probably no shortage of interesting people that have, you know, a wealth of knowledge in certain specific areas that, you know, if you like them enough, then you can kind of be like, hey, like, let me ask you about this, or I have this problem. Can you help me? And I imagine, you know, most people are probably willing and accepting to kind of do that, depending on things, but.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, so many of these guests that we have been, you know, top of their field, extremely successful, and they whether they're like still working or they're retired, certainly the folks that are retired have more time to like help us and kind of hold our hands through things. And it's really just been a matter of asking. You know, I don't know that any of them have necessarily been like, hey, you need us to help you with that, you know? We're just like, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And yeah, we're super fortunate that way. And then also in like building and like learning electrical, plumbing, that kind of thing, we've had really great mentors in doing that too. So I think we're definitely a product of people mentoring us along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like we spend more time with most of our guests than we do with any other people in our life, like more than our friends, more than our family, you know, like with our program, whether it's here or in Alaska, I mean, we go fish with them all day long. then we come back with them and we hang out with them, and then we have dinner with them, and it's like a week at a time of like really like in-depth long conversations, or just being with people as we're fishing. And so like it just naturally comes up like, oh, this is what we're doing. And then we start talking about that. And it's exciting. It's exciting doing something new. But meanwhile, we have the same challenges that they have in their business, whether it's just like employees or scaling something or this or that. And so, there's no way we could be where we are without like great people. And then also part of that is like, we've had lots of like redundant advice that like over the years we have to be like patient with people to be like, oh, cool. Yeah. Thanks for giving us that feedback. But in the back of our minds, like, yeah, we've heard this before, but it's also like, it's really appreciated because it's coming from like a genuine place of like wanting to help. And so like trying to like figure that out over the years. Cause I definitely remember some time like before we bought the lodge where we were like, where we knew we wanted to buy a lodge. We knew we wanted to go to this next thing. And we're like, how do we get there? How do we raise the money? How do we form a plan and stuff? And so it's like, so we were just like going back to these people and getting ideas. And we had lots of like little nuggets of like ideas, but we were like, man, I wish we could find someone that could really like hold us, like how do we get to this next step, but when it was all said and done, all of those conversations really did lead to being able to put it all together.
I was just, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about how that relationship so much, like taking people fishing, they have to trust us so much, right? Like they have to trust that we're going to keep them safe. They're going to, or them and their family. And like, they have to trust that, we're going to be working really hard for them and that kind of thing. And so then we're also like trusting that they're there to like have this experience. So there's like this like really cool trust exchange, which I think has helped a lot in kind of like accelerating the mentorship role with people. Cause it's like, oh, we already trust each other on all these different levels. So yeah, like let's like go to a different arena for this. Yeah.
What I want to step back a little bit. Kate kind of touched on this, but when did you guys meet? How did you guys meet? And, how long was that before sort of starting guiding in Alaska and kind of teaming up as guides? At what point did that sort of come into the equation?
Well, we met when we were both living in Bellingham, working at the H&H Outfitters fishing hunting store there. And I think really that's where we realized we were a good team, more than anything, because we were working together. And then we started fishing and became really good buddies and started dating. And that was a little over 18 years ago. Which is kind of hard to believe.
Seriously. What the hell?
And then we moved to Oregon, or I moved to Oregon, and then she moved to Oregon. So, that was like
a couple years.
Yeah, a few years into our relationship, and then Alaska, started working together there.
Well, so when I came back from my first season guiding in Alaska, and like the whole time you were just like, man, I wish I was in Alaska. And it was the first summer since Justin was 17 that he didn't spend it in Alaska. So that was kind of a weird thing that I was there and he wasn't. And so I think that you were sort of trying to figure out how to get out of what you were doing because you wanted to be in Alaska. And then that opportunity came up. Or maybe you just took that opportunity. But, and then as soon as Justin quit what he was doing, then that's when I called up Heath and Nancy and said, hey, Justin is available to guide this summer. Can we use another guide? And they said, yeah. So I said that was 2009 that we both guided together.
Was that what you were doing before? Was that working on the film tour?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Working on the film tour and working for AEGBDS. So doing film tour stuff and traveling and fishing and making fishing videos.
Yeah. How did you get connected with those guys? Because Kopi and I were talking about it last night. I was trying to remember. I feel like I remember seeing you in the Mongolia film. Is that right?
Yep.
Fish Bum Diaries Mongolia. Mm-hmm. Did you do any of those other Bum Diaries films with them?
Yeah, I was in New Zealand and did the New Zealand one. I wasn't there for the whole trip, but it was just this like perfect scenario where I had got to know a number of these guys really through the old WashingtonFlyFishing.com forum, and through just, you know, being in fishing and I was going to school at Western, and it happened, or I was going to school at Whatcom Community College, and then I was transferred to Western, and then just happened to have like a semester off in the wintertime. And so like had this free time, and the guy's like, hey, you want to come to New Zealand? And I'm like, sure. Like I'd always wanted to go do that. And so it just made it work to fly down there for a month and join the dudes. And I mean, I'd never done anything like that ever, you know, and it wasn't like I was like part of the business or anything at that point. And then the next, I don't know if it was,
you did Iceland too.
And then I went to Iceland as well. And, I was trying to think of the timeline of, cause we shot that New Zealand thing. I don't know if it was the next summer or the next winter, but anyway, it just like worked out that the guy's like, hey, we're going to be moving to Southern Oregon. We've got a guy who's going to like be a business partner with us. And if you want to come down, we can, you know, here's an opportunity. And so I was like, well, yeah, I don't want to go to school anymore. I'm going to go and go and do this. If like I get to go fishing and traveling and like do that. So I went from like working in Alaska seasonally I was working for a seafood company at that time, just work in an office. And then I'd spend like the rest of my like summer season, I'd get done with that, like the, you know, middle or end of July. And there was I wanted to become a guide there. And I was really inspired by this guy, Mark Rutherford, that had this like rafting adventure, you know, fly fishing operation. And it was like, you know, early 2000s at the time when I kind of started like noticing what he was doing. And, you know, it was kind of, you know, it was before YouTube really took off, and there wasn't a whole lot of information online about, you know, there were still like kind of secret spots in you know, fishing anywhere, but especially in Alaska. And so like he was like putting out like a newsletter, you know, every season. I'm like, oh man, where's he going? And started to kind of figure out the different spots, just talking to people in the area and stuff. And so Buddy and I bought a raft together, and we started doing some of these floats to try to learn the different rivers and whatever. And so anyway, at the end of my work season, and then I spent another month fishing and floating through Western Alaska, I got the call that I could, you know, maybe go to Southern Oregon. So I just moved down there and, you know, started doing that full time. So
the film tour in AEG is what brought you to Oregon, mm-hmm. Southern Oregon?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Our business partner down there was a cousin of one of the guys, and he owned a rafting, kayaking business on the Rogue. And so he thought, well, this might be a good combination. He had some like, middle and lower Rogue launch days. So he thought, well, these guys are doing some stuff. Maybe this will help promote my business. And so that's really how that all came together down there. So I moved down to Grants Pass.
Did you, when you got into that, did you have any experience with film, or did the rest of those guys?
No one had any experience with that stuff. They were just
winging it,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I was telling Kobe last night, I remember when the Patagonia one came out, I think that was the first one, mm-hmm. just like Trout Bum Diaries, mm-hmm. Patagonia or something like that. And I remember, to me, that was kind of the first fly fishing film that I remember seeing that was, you know, sort of in that genre, kind of a takeoff of the skate film or snowboard cuts and stuff like that. And I just remember seeing that for the first time, and it was exciting.
It was so
right? Cool. It was so cool. It wasn't some guy standing in a trout stream sort of intoning about, you know, the glories of dry fly fishing for browns in whatever river. It was these goofy young dudes in this rig that kept breaking down on them, catching huge fish, having a really good time. And it was cool to see. So how did that lead into the sort of origins of the film tour?
That led into the origins of the film tour, but I think really just following that same thing of being like, well, man, guys make ski and snowboard movies, and then they go, show them in theater. So it was really just following that same, model. And yeah, one thing leading to another. I mean, I think the first year was like a couple showings here and there. And I mean, at that time there was really not very much content out there. So it was like what those guys were like, what like AEG started with the Trout Bum Diaries. And then, like Felt Soul Media had, they were starting to do stuff, and Mikey Weir had been doing stuff. And that's, he connected with the guys when they were in Patagonia. And so there was just like this like small group of people that were starting to do stuff just because the technology was just becoming available, that you could actually afford to have a small camera and go shoot stuff. And then that slowly grew over time. And it was really once, like when we all moved to Oregon and had this new business partner that could, bring a little bit more money to the equation and more organization, that we started to go, okay, this is what we want to do. There is some content out there. Let's try to take this to the next level and, do it in a more organized fashion.
Did you guys manage to make a little bit of a living off of it, or was it kind of more just having fun, going cool places to fish and not having to pay too much out of pocket?
I mean, it started out by that, doing that. And then when we brought on this other guy, or when the guys brought on the other guy, and then I got to become involved with it, like, we were all making a salary, and the business was like losing money, but it was still like with the intention of, someday we would, have something.
Yeah.
And then it ended up all just kind of blowing up, and everyone, walking away. Yeah. We all got sued.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like,
I feel like I've heard lots of stories about
kind of a terrible, implosion at the end. But yeah, like we actually got to go like get paid a little bit of money to travel around the world. Kind of
living the dream for a minute.
Yeah. For a minute. Totally.
That's so cool. So you leave F3T, you go to Alaska. It's 2009, right? You guys that's your first summer together up in Alaska. How did that go from you guys just going up to work at a lodge together to having your own lodge? What was that intervening period like?
I think it was the following winter that we started the Steelhead Lodge, and it was like we rented a house for whatever weeks we could book. It wasn't it wasn't like now where we have a lodge house in Oregon that we're in right now. And that was like such a dream for such a long period of time, from 2010 to 2020 when we bought this house.
With that, originally renting a house was the goal at that time to try and have people come for 4 or 5 days at a time and stay with you guys and eat meals with you guys and everything? I
think we did 3-day trips, and Justin guided and I cooked. It's not that great. But, we were just trying to figure it out. A big part of the winter steelhead season was to make a little bit of money so we could go to Baja for 2 months and play and do that before we went to Alaska. So, and also just kind of afford our winter lifestyle in some way, I think. And I don't know how that all kind of evolved, but definitely like bringing that Alaska idea to Oregon. And then I think after a couple of years, it became apparent that it would be so much better if we had our own place, because we are definitely the kind of people that we're constantly like, oh, how do we make this better? Right. And in our minds, like, oh, well, one way that we feel like we can make this better is if we controlled all the controllables. So like the way the house feels, the art on the walls, the bedding, the privacy that each guest gets to have, right? It's like here we have 4 guests, we have 4 rooms. So those were, and if we could have a really great chef and have great plateware that we eat off of, like that kind of thing was something we were always kind of like, oh, how do we make this better? And that'd be kind of the end goal. So I think it was just after a few seasons that we saw, gosh, this would be so much better if we had our own place. But, it took 10 years from the time we started it to actually being able to buy a house that we could put our guests in.
Yeah. And the first 3 or 4 or 5 years, I mean, we were, trying to find a different base every season, because our first year we're like, well, we don't have 2 months of trips lined up. We have a week of trips, so we rent a house for a week. And then the next year, okay, let's try to do 3 weeks and then, build it that way. And so at that time, the winter, tourism here was pretty minimal. So we try to find, and Airbnb was kind of starting to take off a little bit. So there was houses that were being rented as short-term rentals. So we try to go find a home in the right area and then approach the homeowner and say, hey, look, would you be interested in doing something for more of a long term? And I was kind of always what are you guys doing? Or why do you want to do this? And it's who are you? And so it took a number of years before we found a home that we could stay at for a longer period of time and not pay just a nightly retail price. And I think that place were we there for 4 seasons or 5 seasons?
I think it was 5.
Yeah. So we were at the same house for 5 seasons, which was nice because then we didn't have to worry about, what are we going to do next year? And at that point in the business, things were still certainly there's no guarantee that we were going to rebook everybody the next year. So we didn't have the opportunity to be hey, we definitely want these same weeks, because if we didn't book them, we were just barely making it. So if we didn't rebook them, we had the obligation to rent the place, it would have been a major challenge for us. So we knew what we wanted to do, but also like Kate's saying, we certainly didn't, it took us a number of years to realize, okay, we rent this house for whatever amount of time and it's furnished and it has stuff, but there's actually not the right, silverware or whatever. So we started acquiring all of this stuff for our pop-up lodge, so we started we got our own plateware and we got our own this and that and just started, growing that kit essentially.
It would take us a whole day to move in and out or more. Yeah. So okay, we'll just buy our own bedding and replace all this. And it was just a lot.
Yeah, for each steelhead season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then at the same time, we started doing that in Mexico. So we were doing our Alaska season, we're working for somebody else. And then we'd, like Kate was saying, we would go to Mexico just to go fish. And then we started doing some guiding there. And then I think it was our first year down there, we did one pop-up lodge trip. And then and people loved it. I want to go do that again. So then the next year we did 2, or we did.
Wasn't that through Moldy Chum?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So through the Moldy Chum website, we did this Moldy Chum hosted trip to Mexico and rented a house and did some guiding and hosting down there. But again, started to just see there's all these things that are outside of our control. What if we took and put everything in one box but yeah, after a number of years doing that, we're going from a 2 or 3 month winter steelhead season and then going to a 2-month Baja season and then up to Alaska. And what was once just the idea of going to Alaska and working there was that we could then take the rest of the year pretty much off to just fish and do whatever we wanted. And it very quickly slid into a really full-time job.
Are there ever times where where you've felt oh, we've gotten ourselves in too deep?
All the time. Still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that feeling? How do you push through it? Keep going.
Great question. I mean, I think that the lodge in Alaska for the last 4 years really has just been so all consuming. And I think that it's so hard. I think we knew that it would be a lot, and then it's just so hard to predict how much that really is. And I think there's been so many times that it's just like, wow, this is so overwhelming. What are we doing? Like, how is this even humanly possible to be doing all this stuff at once? Like, I'm losing my mind. And I've certainly had like fair share of meltdowns. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like it's so hard. It can be so hard. And I think, it's like fundamentally we're fishing guides and we're hosts, but also, we're builders and we are planners and we're project managers and we're employers and I'm the CFO and, I'm the COO and all those things that it's a lot of C's that it's like, I don't have the experience to do that because I was a fishing guide. But what we do have is this like determination and this drive and this like lack of fear around working hard. And no matter how chaotic it gets, like we just go forward, I guess. And I think it's a constant thing, but also as it's happening, it's like, okay, well, how can we change this? Kind of going back to like, we're always trying to make things better. It's like, okay, this is too much. What can we do? And like last year we found this gal, Jean, who is like my administrative assistant now. And she is amazing. Right. And like, that was such a huge relief. All of a sudden, like this list on my phone of all these things that I want to do that I don't have time to do. And also I don't have a graphic design degree, like I want to see these things come to fruition, but I don't have the time or the ability. And so it's like, hey, Jean, can you help with this? And like, not only is she going to take it and do it, she's going to run with it and make it way better than I could have imagined. And then like hiring Gabe and Sophia, like the next generation of guides for us, like that's been a huge help, right? Like just coming into steelhead season this year, and they were like able to help us like set up the lodge for the season. Like it was huge, right? Those little things where it's kind of, and our chef, Jason, is just, he's just such a professional and so great at what he does. And we just know that, and like, he's just there, like helping us along the way too, and being such a big part of it. So I think it's just like assembling a team and then figure out how to like assemble more of a team. I mean, I think it was over 10 years ago that one of our guests said, hey, like coming on these trips with you guys is so great. Like the experience is just next level. And he had been coming since the beginning. And he was like, but the whole process of like booking the trip and paying sucks. It doesn't equal the experience that you're giving us. And he was like, so I really think you should hire someone to handle that process for you. And we were like, dude, we're literally barely making it. Like how are we going to hire somebody? And he was like, listen, if you hire this person and if it doesn't make you more money, I'll pay their salary that year, which was like the easiest gamble for him because he knew it would work.
Yeah.
So that's when we hired Danny, and Danny actually came on one of the Moldy Chum trips to Mexico, and that's how we met him. And he lives in Colorado, and he's been like handling all of our bookings, invoicing, like we call him the bad cop, like, and he's been like handling that at such a high level. The communication with our guests is parallel to the experience they have with us. And like, we never looked back from that. Right. So every time where it's like, wow, this is so overwhelming. How can we do this better? We got to figure out how to hire somebody, and then the money will just work itself out, which is like terrifying at the time.
Yeah. Like bringing him on was definitely like our first explosion in opportunity, as far as like, because we were so tapped on what we were doing and just didn't have any more time in the day, so to bring him on, it just really allowed us to be able to scale, even though it doesn't seem like much, but to go from guiding all the time and then responding to inquiries and then taking payment and then managing the calendar and all that kind of stuff, like taking that off the plate, or at least a big part of it off the plate, was was really huge.
Oh, he's a lifesaver. We always tell him, like, we couldn't do this without you. Don't leave us.
We'll get back to the Crumps in a minute, but I wanted to share a few thoughts on my new decked system. The first thing that really stood out to me was how simple it was to install this thing. It took just a couple hours, and though it might have been nice to have an assistant older than 6 years old, thanks Carver for your help, buddy, I managed it all just fine on my own. As soon as I had it all together, the benefits became obvious. I headed out for a float this past weekend on a local trout river, and instead of piling gear into the cab of my truck so it wouldn't fly away on the freeway, I could easily load and organize everything in the drawers for the drive over the mountains. Once there, boots, net, PFDs, snacks went into the boat, along with the 6er 16 deco box, which I'd preloaded with all the necessary fishing gear prior to leaving the house. At the end of the day, unloading the truck was quick and easy, and cleanup was a breeze thanks to the cargo hatches, which are perfect for the collection of crushed cans, which inevitably end up rolling around the bottom of the boat by day's end. So to say I'm into it would be an understatement. For a guy who's rarely as organized as I'd like to be, the drawer system is a game changer. Don't forget, this stuff is made in the USA and shipping is always free. Visit deck.com/flyfish to figure out which system best fits your rig, and then get out there, get decked, and get after it. Yeah. Do you guys feel like you guys are married, you guided together, you're business partners, you're, property owners, you're building this thing in Alaska together. Do you feel like you each sort of have qualities that can sort of complement each other? Like somebody is more organized and somebody is more creative or something like that? Or do you guys feel like you're just kind of both?
I like how you looked at Kate when you said more organized.
We locked eyes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Kate's like super organized, super like let's like step back to reality on this, and I'm much more the like dreamer. We can just do everything all the time, and then we're gonna figure it out. And so I'm learning to try to kind of temper expectations too a little bit, but
we're super different people. So I think that's like such the challenge in any relationship, right? Is figuring out how do you like takes two different people and like make a life that flows instead of like hitting rapids all the time. And I think that like anybody else, we certainly like struggle. Wow, the dog is being so loud. Sorry.
That's all right. Or sitting in a fishing lodge, there should be a dog around. Whacking her tail on the floor. She just wants us to go play with her.
Yeah, she does.
Stop talking to those things and throw one for me.
Yeah, I think that like going back to that, like just trying to figure out like how do we like what's the best approach to any scenario?
Yeah,
kind of like that mentality, and like how do we work together and figure it out?
You guys basically found a piece of property in Naknek.
Oh, that where the lodge is?
Yeah, where the lodge is, and then basically built the entire thing from the ground up, and now it's somewhat complete or close to. I'm pretty sure it's complete. It's complete.
We actually the first year that I was guiding, the first place I drove a jet boat was to this lodge, which is just not lost on me. And then throughout the season, the more I really got to know the river, the more I fell in love with that property. And I just felt like it was the best spot on the river, like location wise, and everything about it just really resonated for me. And Justin and I talked about like, this place is so cool. If we were going to be crazy enough to buy a lodge, this would be the one we would want here. And so when we were starting our own business in Alaska, kind of branching out from the lodge we worked for, and taking that big risk in our life, he actually reached out around that same time and said, hey, I'm going to be selling the lodge and I'd really like to sell to you guys if you're interested. we said yes right away.
When was this?
That would have been 2016.
Yeah, 2016 was our first year running our own business there.
And you bought that lodge and started running out of the lodge that was there?
Yeah. So it took a while, right? It took a while for him to get ready to sell his legacy, essentially, and for us to be able to figure out how to do that. Right. That wasn't anything we knew how to do. So it took a long time to get to that point. So we closed on the lodge in October 2021. And it was run as a do-it-yourself camp. And really, guests came in, they had little kitchenettes in the cabins. They brought their own food or they bought it at the local store. It's just not a lot of options. And then he would guide people for the first day or two, and then they would sort of have a boat to have free reign on the river and go fishing, which sounds pretty fun, right? But that was definitely not the program that we wanted to do. And each one of those cabins needed to be remodeled, essentially, to put guests in there. And we needed to build a main lodge building that had a commercial kitchen, a dining area, living room, and a bar. But thankfully, when he approached us in 2016, we were having, around that time, we had dinner with this builder in Naknek that we knew from, I've actually known him longer than I've known Justin, from fishing. And he was up there building stuff for the commercial fishing industry. And so we talked to him about it. And he said, I'll build the lodge for you. So we couldn't have had, he was the right person for the job. I don't think anybody else could have gotten a lodge built in 7 weeks. 7 weeks,
Wow.
They were 12-hour days, 7 days a week, a crew. At one point, between our crew of friends and family helping and his crew, we had 22 people working on the property. It was crazy.
Yeah, I feel like I remember seeing like a lot of the social media stuff that you guys were posting like during that process. And it was just like, holy cow, like kind of going back to what you guys were talking about in terms of like, okay, like what are your strengths and what are your strengths and like how, we're doing this all. And it was just like, yeah, like all of a sudden, like, sure, you have great people helping you, but also just like kind of the speed that was progressing at was probably pretty amazing and unbelievable to be a part of and see in real time doing that.
Oh, huge. And it took so much organization because you can't like go to Home Depot there and buy something. So it all has to be planned out ahead of time by people that have never done this before. So, our project side was all of the cabin remodels and getting those ready for guests. And there were just things that just kept coming up, right? Like we would take a wall off to like, fix something and it would be like rotten behind it. So like, oh, now we have to redo that whole wall. So those experiences that pretty much anybody that's done home remodel has. But yeah, and then the crew, like, figuring out how it's going to look. There was so much. It's really kind of feels surreal looking back on it. Like, and I think it's taken years to recover from that, like the stress and like, the exhaustion. I don't think it's pretty wild and so hard to explain to people. We really did try to like, show it on social media because it was so crazy. And there were certainly things that we couldn't show, but it was a mess right up until the first guest came. We were just trying to figure out what's the most important and really like guest cabins. And this year will be our third season. And what we're really focusing on going in is like the landscaping. We did a little bit of that last year. So really completing that. And then we put up a big greenhouse this last summer. So really kind of making our gardens really beautiful and a place that people want to come kind of walk through and be a part of. So we're trying to grow a lot of our own vegetables, and we want to grow flowers this year too for decoration.
I think like looking back, there's been so many times where we're like pretty naive in what we can do or what our like skill set is or that type of thing. Like So when Tom talked to us in 2016, he was like, hey, you want to buy our lodge? And we're like, yeah, no problem. Like, it is so good that we didn't buy it then because we were not ready. I mean, we thought like, okay, well, we have this experience in Oregon where we're hosting 4 guests at a time. We've been doing it in Mexico where maybe we're up to 6. Like, what's the difference? You know, like, we know how to, like, for the most part, we know how to like feed people, and we know the culture we want to build, and we kind of know the thing. But then, like, after our first year running the lodge, like, remember, like, towards the end of the season, somebody asked, and they were like, hey, like, what was your biggest surprise, you know, after running this season? And like, the biggest surprise was that even though we'd been, you know, we'd run 6 seasons working on our own, and we've been building our business to get to where we would transition to the lodge. Like, it started out just Kate and I guiding, then we hired another guy and then another guy. So we were running 8 guests at a time. We were helping people with logistics on getting there. We were doing flyouts every day, working with local air taxi. So we thought, like, it's going to be a pretty easy transition where it's 8 guests, and now we're just going to be in charge of the hotel side of things and the food side of things, and, you know, the flying side of things. And it was a totally new business, you know. Yeah. So it was a totally new startup, and just like more people and more stuff to figure out. And that was like such a shock. So had we bought it and tried to do it in 2017, we would have been even more in over our head than we already were. And like, it was the same thing with that building process where, I mean, Jim said we could do it, but also, I mean, we had the most perfect spring to build that year. I mean, it was warm and dry. We had no delays. Everything that we ordered, all the barges showed up on time, and all the containers showed up on time. And then, you know, there was the oddball thing that maybe wasn't there, but we were able to get it. And you know, for them to do what they did in that amount of time. And there was certainly some things that weren't quite done. I mean, our first week of the season, we didn't have a working hood vent in our oven, and, you know, there were some challenges, and Jason, our chef, had to, like, he was like prepping food at our house there in King Salmon, and it was like this, you know, huge stresses on everyone to get it, you know, to work. But there's been a lot of that. Just like, yeah, we can do it. We can figure it out, and then, you know, figure it out on the fly. And then hopefully now, you know, after the season or whatever, we look back and, okay, what kind of changes do we need to make it not kill all of us?
Yeah, I think that Justin and I have done a good job through the years of just like rolling with it. And so then now that we have other team members that were responsible for their like enjoyment, and then it's like, oh, we really can't put them through that. Like, it's one thing if we're just putting each other through that and we kind of like roll through it and we figure it out, but like to subject other people to that just seems really unfair. So I think that's probably our more recent challenge, is how do we get ourselves into those situations less.
Yeah, because like we want it to be, the whole experience to be good for everybody. You know, like we want it to be great for us and be great for our team. And if it's great for us and our team, then we're going to be able to give a better experience to our guests. And there's certainly endless stories about remote lodges in Alaska where people are just put through like hell every year, and then they just roll over and get a whole new group of workers and guides to do that. And I mean, I think there's probably a lot of that's like unintentionally done, but also some of it's just like, whatever. It's like they're disposable. So certainly we've like put our crew through a lot more than we would have ever like anticipated, and it was not intentional, and it wasn't to take advantage of people or anything. It's just like, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And yeah, so trying to learn from that is a constant conversation.
I think those kind of sorts of experiences also, though, will just like help you and, you know, your team just like bond and become closer and stronger as a whole together, though. Like any kind of like what you're saying, like any relationship and whatnot. So it's probably in the big picture like a plus, even though you kind of like, oh yeah, we might have could have done that different or better or something. But hey, like, yeah.
Well, that's why we bought the karaoke machine, for bonding with the team. It's like healthy bonding.
Yeah.
Not dysfunctional bonding.
Yeah.
What is it, Kate? You said something a little while ago about that place the location of the lodge and how it was sort of special to you. I'm wondering what it is. What is it about that spot, especially if somebody's never been to the Naknek, to Bristol Bay, to that, king salmon area? Like, what is it that sort of called to you and you as well, Justin?
Yeah, take this, Justin.
Well, I think just the spot itself is a really unique place on the Naknek, in that the Naknek it's a big river, and in certain places it's really wide, and there's it's also in a part of Bristol Bay that's kind of we're down from the mountains. You're in this big. I think people are often surprised when they fly into king salmon, or they fly mostly into king salmon. It's like it's this big flat area, there's mountains there, and then it's these big lake system, and then it's this long, flat tundra zone that's just got lots of ponds and bogs and whatnot. So there's not necessarily a lot to look at right there. If you on a clear day, you can see mountains, or you can see volcanoes and that type of stuff. But where the lodge is, it's actually in a fairly narrow part of the Naknek. So it's like seeing the other bank, it's right there. And we're on this bluff above the river, so you can really clearly see what's on the other side. And then there's this draw that opens up. So it's a place that, like, if you're a hunter, you just want to grab your binoculars and glass and just look. You imagine a herd of caribou walking over the hill, or seeing a moose or a bear. And so it's just this, like, there's a lot to look at right there. And then we're like less than a 5-minute boat ride from where the great trout fishing starts, and we're right at the head of tidewater. So there's like, a few minutes away, there's all the salmon swim right by our dock, but there's great salmon fishing just downstream from us. So it's this like really just a cool location that's right in the middle of all of it.
As an angler, what is your favorite thing to fish for there?
Yeah, but so over time it's changed for sure. Because there's, you do anything for a long time and you just have a different perspective on what it is. But I would say two things are my favorite. My number one favorite thing is to go and just be in the backcountry somewhere and be alone, try to get on a small stream that you hike into. And that part of it's really special, because it's like the more you travel, the more you fish different places, you realize how rare it is to just go be alone in nature somewhere. Especially in Bristol Bay, because it's been a sport fishing destination since the 60s. If you can land a float plane on water, or if you can land a float plane there and there's fish nearby, people have fished it. There's not really anywhere within a reasonable distance that people aren't fishing. And then the easier to access spots have more people, and just because the time of it all, getting to know the runs and timing and all the different things, there's not those secret places anymore. So to have those moments where you're out somewhere like in Katmai National Park or Bashiraf Wildlife Refuge, where you're alone and there's bears walking around and there's sockeye spawning and there's rainbow trout behind them, and it's that's a really cool experience. And I think I appreciate that more and more. And then I appreciate the wildlife stuff that you just bump into. Of course there's bears all over the place, but you'll have a pack of wolves start howling across the river from you, or show up on the river with you, or see a wolverine, or see, just see these random things, whether you're on the river or from the air, because we're flying around in an old float plane, going 100 miles an hour at 1,000 feet, so you're just getting to see stuff from a really cool perspective all the time. But from a just straight fishing, angling thing, still our fall fishery on the Naknek is the coolest thing ever. It's you're fishing for fish that are about the same size as our winter steelhead here, and this giant river that they have full access to. So you hook one of these 8 or 10 pound rainbows, and they just empty your reel. You see way more, you see more backing than you do at any other experience ever. And they're super cool fish. There's only a couple populations of rainbows like this in the world, where they spend most of their life in a lake and then they drop down to spawn in a river. And like on the Naknek trout, for example, I mean, it's been about 20 years now, but there was a study that was done that did some radio tagging and scale samples and whatnot. And they found that the fish didn't reach spawning age until they were about 6 years old. And at 6, they were 24 inches. So like super slow growing fish. And the like big fish, the like 30 plus inch fish, were going to be like 10 years and older. So like really unique for rainbow trout to grow to that size. And what they also found was about half of the rainbow population dropped out of the lake in the fall, and they overwinter, and then the other half would drop out in the spring, and then they would, obviously spawn in the spring. So like the Naknek rainbow population is doing, the Naknek River rainbow population is doing different things than the populations that live in the same lake that are going into the creeks that feed the lake. So the smaller streams, the fish are, primarily, going into the creeks in the springtime, spawning. Some stick around throughout the summertime if the conditions are such. If we have a warm, dry summer, they'll stay in the creeks and eat dry flies or whatever, or whatever they can until the salmon, come back in the, end of July, early August. But for the most part, they're following those salmon out of the lakes, chasing them upriver, eating eggs, eating flesh, and then dropping back out because, in the wintertime, the creeks are so small, they're more or less freezing up, so there's not a lot of safe habitat for them. So their migration into the creeks is way more for feeding, where the Naknek fish they're acting a lot more like a summer steelhead. They're coming out of the lake, they're feeding, but they're not there exclusively to feed. And they're huge, and they look just like steelhead because they're the same thing, these giant migratory rainbows.
Yeah. They're pretty awesome fish.
we got to fish the smolt bust for a few days when we were up there years ago, and like by far, in a way, like that was kind of one of my favorite things about that place. And yeah, there's other people around and some other boats and whatnot, and it's not quite the same, like being alone out in the wilderness like you were talking about, but just the absolute like chaoticness and the visual aspect of it was just like incredible. Like it was amazing to witness. Like it was such a cool thing.
So much fun. What you started to get into this, Justin, but for you guys, whether it's the lodge here in Oregon or the lodge at 58 North, building these new lodges, building them now, in the third decade of the 21st century. How do you think it's been, how do you think it's a different thing now? How are you guys taking into account your concerns around conservation and the health of, these systems? How are you kind of, working to bring those two things together? Because I know you both are super involved with conservation organizations, Pacific Rivers and others. So what does that look like for you guys to kind of, have a business, run a business, have money to keep running the business, but also keep those other things sort of front and center for yourselves and for your clients and the communities?
I think we've definitely had to step back a little bit on our conservation work as we've been building the lodge. Like we were talking about before, it's just so many overwhelming things. It's like, well, this has kind of got to give a little bit. But, before that, just investing a lot of our own personal time in conservation related to where we are and what we care about. I think that no matter from a business standpoint, that wherever our business is, the resource that we're going after is under attack, right? No matter whether it's in Alaska or it's here in Oregon.
Yeah.
So it's, from a business standpoint, you really can't afford to sit back and just let whatever happens. You have to think about, for example, in Alaska, if the pebble mine happened, that would just be devastating to our industry. And in our lifetime of owning this lodge could really alter the the business so much. So I think there's kind of that side of it, but also that like we just deeply care about these things before we were business owners, or like even as we were becoming business owners, but that wasn't the most important thing in our life, or wasn't how we maybe looked at our life. So we were looking at it more as like anglers and users of the resource in these areas, and these places that we really love, and these fish that we really, have modeled our life around. So it was important to participate in their protection and the protection of water and that kind of thing. So I think like through the practices, like we were talking about having a pop-up lodge, like we've always really looked at like, how do we make it more sustainable on that side of things? And certainly now having a lodge in Alaska where we're burning 25 gallons an hour of avgas doesn't feel like super sustainable. So what can we do on the other side of that, right? Like we don't have reusable water bottles, and that seems so simple, but we just recently went on a fishing trip where there was like plastic water bottles, and you're like, this is crazy, and styrofoam cups and stuff like that. So I think it's just important to remember that our perspective isn't everyone's perspective, but we're constantly doing things on that side, on that front anyway. And then participating, I'm on the board of Pacific Rivers, and that's such a great organization. It's so small, but the effect is so big. They work on so many different projects, and a lot of it in Oregon, but in the rivers across the West. And I'm a Wild Salmon Center ambassador, so it's fun like staying in touch with the work that they're doing and always being informed and having the opportunity to participate. And then also kind of through those processes, learning that when you sign, like, you get the, like, how many emails do you get a day that are like, this is under attack, we need your signature. And it's hard to feel like that matters. But through this process, like really understanding that just writing your name and sending that email and signing up for that action alert has huge repercussions and is like so helpful for these organizations we care about. So it's nice because it's like, that's a really low effort, like contribution, right? It's so easy to like click on the action alert. It takes less than a minute and participate that way. Yeah.
I think like there's oftentimes things that we do that are like a function of that like serve like a utilitarian function that also happen to be maybe make things that are like a better thing. So like an example in Alaska, we have to get all of our everything, like all of our food flown in, right? So that's coming from Anchorage, and then we have to like hire somebody to go pick that up, and then most of that food's actually not coming from there, so then it's coming from somewhere else. And so like oftentimes you order some produce, and then by the time it makes it to the store in Anchorage, it's already kind of like on its last legs, and then by the time it makes it out to us, it's like even more so on its last legs, or it gets like held up or something. So not only are you spending money that is something that's like has a really short shelf life, you're wasting time, you're wasting resources, all this stuff. So, and that makes it harder on our kitchen team because they don't have what they need or what they want to make things with. So like, a number of years ago before we had the lodge, we're like, man, like only thing that we're in charge of at that time was making lunch. So like the lodge where people were staying at, they would get breakfast and dinner. So we're like, well, man, like what would make more sense for us to like make that process better, because we go to the store to buy bread and the bread's like stale or whatever. And so we're like, well, let's start making our own bread. Well, like what could we start growing to make this process better? So we like put up a small greenhouse and started growing like lettuce and stuff. And so it was like a tiny part that was really to make our just like logistics better, because we couldn't store enough bread or we couldn't store enough greens to have it like not go bad. But in turn, what that meant was that we weren't having that come from somewhere else, and we weren't, using up additional resources. So now at the lodge, like we put in this high tunnel last year. I mean, it's a 30 by 50 commercial greenhouse.
Oh, wow.
And we're growing a ton of stuff. And so not only are we not having veggies show up that are like done, we're producing all this stuff. And so we're, in a lot of ways, using less resources, and it's really inspiring to see, man, gosh, we can be growing a lot of our own food right here. And maybe that like inspires somebody else to do the same thing, because Alaska, even though it is like very much like really short growing season, like Alaska is this major food desert because it's expensive to get things started, but the summertime growing opportunities are amazing.
A lot of daylight.
Yeah, there's a lot of daylight, so we're going to be expanding that this year and just improving upon that. So like something that was really done out of like a necessity to make our logistics and everything better have this like potentially greater effect to all these other components.
Yeah. That's cool. I haven't done a ton of lodge visits, but a couple that I've been to, growing their own produce, even in a spot where it's like, you're in a canyon where it doesn't look like there should be a garden here, and yet there's a garden there, and we're having, fresh greens with dinner. Like that's a pretty special thing, pretty special extra step to take. But I think, like you're talking about, the sort of further reaching impacts of that are, it seems like a little thing, but it's a big deal over time. So yeah. Well, you guys are, you're wrapping up the steelhead season here in Oregon, or it's pretty much wrapped up. What is the first day of guiding for you guys in Alaska this year?
Our guests come in on June 13th.
Okay.
Our first guests.
When are you guys headed up there? Pretty soon?
Yeah, probably about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay. And then it's just nose to the grindstone, getting everything ready for the season?
We have a pretty optimistic project list.
Yeah.
And you guys kind of understand that after yesterday. Like we were buying lumber yesterday and things kind of went sideways.
Yeah.
Ended up being too late to do this podcast. But so we are getting ready to fill a 20-foot container to go on a barge to Alaska. So we've been in the planning stages for weeks now while we're operating steelhead season, which is kind of tough, but just figuring out, okay, what projects are we going to do? What's the budget for them? What can't we do? And what do we need to accomplish them? What do we think we need to accomplish them? I think is probably the best way to do it. And then how do we get that stuff from here to the container in Seattle? Who's going to help us load it? Justin's parents are the best employees we have. They're the cheapest and the best and most very reliable.
Do you guys still get a sense of excitement before the season starts, getting ready to go up there? Is there kind of a buzz or butterflies or?
I think.
Or is it a little bit of dread?
I think that we've been going up in April for the last 3 or 4 years, and that feels like a little dreadful in the sense of like normally we would be like this would be our time to hang out with our friends and kind of have some fun, and if that always kind of feels a little tough, like we're leaving here and this time that was sort of our time to go like continue working. So I mean that's like definitely for me that's hard. But also like once we get there, it's like we have a home there. It feels like home. And there's this excitement of like, oh yeah, we have all this stuff to do. And it's exciting to like make things, to like see our vision kind of come to fruition through work. And it's a beautiful place. It's like, it has like, we've been going there for so long, right? It has this great draw and this great feeling when we're there. So that certainly helps. And then as we're going, it's like, oh, wow, look at the things that we're doing. And that gets exciting. And then I can't wait to show this to our guests that have been coming and seen these changes. And, oh, they're going to think this is so cool. And our team too, right? It's like, oh, I can't wait for our team to see what we've done. And then, yeah, it's super fun to get the team back together, right? That's exciting. And then, okay, here we go. We've got an awesome season, and what is it going to bring? And then, you start remembering like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see a bear, and, I can't wait to see a moose and all of those things. I can't wait to see a rainbow. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when we get there, we're really there as things come to life. We're going to be there, and all the grass is going to still be yellow or brown,
or snow.
I mean, there's still snow on the ground right now, and the ground's frozen.
The river just opened up.
Yeah, the river just opened up, but it's day to day, you see things come to life. I mean, it's like you go from one day, there's just nothing, and then the next day there's like birds that weren't there, like migratory birds start showing up, and there's all these sounds. Like it's like you just can hear it come to life with different things. And then as you get towards the end of May and early June, it goes from 1 or 2 commercial flights a day to maybe 3 or 4, and then all the float planes start showing up. So you start hearing de Havilland and beavers flying around, and so there's the skies full of sound. So there's all these like different like senses that are being like really like you're feeling it and seeing it, and like seeing this anticipation as it's building for the season to happen, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's like being there for everything waking up. Mm-hmm. It's how it feels.
Yeah. And there's some like really nice days in the springtime where you get it like a 60-degree day, and it's sunny, and the bugs haven't come out yet. So you get to like hang out on your deck, and in the sun, and the days are already like longer there than they are here, like now. So you get this like, it's like, that's pretty cool and energizing. And
we had one of those days last spring.
Yeah. Last spring wasn't very nice, but it does happen.
It's probably a much welcome change from the, sunless winters out here.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's, a little gray and cloudy, but even just having, like I notice it automatically with the time change all of a sudden. And then it's like, oh, wow, cool. The sun's not setting till like after 7 o'clock. It's like, wow, cool. Things are going up like after kind of the
It's energizing too, right? Like you're also ramping up at the same time from that light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, yeah, it's been really cool to see you guys, following the building of the lodge up there from afar on social media and online and stuff, and just seeing what you guys have been making and creating. I think it's admirable and impressive in a lot of ways as well. And I hope you guys have a really, really great season this year and have fun up there. But and thanks so much for sitting down to talk to us and tell us all about it. Really appreciate it.
This is like how far we've come since we all got together in West Seattle and partied, and then like all piled into your Volkswagen van, and
that's right.
And you're like, oh, I guess you guys can all sleep on different places in my house.
Yeah, I think Kato was there, right?
Yeah, Kato was there.
Dylan
slept with a towel.
On the towel. You just say it was a late night.
It was fun.
Thanks again for listening to Sidechannels, presented by the Fly Fish Journal. Sidechannels is produced and edited by yours truly, with production support from Jeff Galbraith and Colin Wiseman, and digital and web support from Jesse Lou Galbraith, Colby Messick, and Kopi Vojta. Thanks as well to our sponsors, Decked. Get decked and get after it at decked.com/flyfish, and Patagonia Fly Fishing, dependable gear built to connect with wild fish. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fish to learn more about the great stuff they've got going on. And of course, if you're enjoying Sidechannels, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to rate and review the show. It makes a big difference and helps others find the show. Have fun out there, enjoy the process, and we'll see you in a couple weeks with episode 3.